Thank you, Marina, and I will be very brief because it's time to have rest and lunch. So, and in a way, there were some concluding remarks already for this last panel. Some are not really optimistic. It was tragic for the Austro-Marxists in Vienna, and also, we spoke a lot about failures, of course, of this NTA. So I will briefly tell some observation after these 3 intense days of conference. I'm not a specialist on what the insiders call NTA or NCA. I'm more an outsider, but still, my research focuses on borders and federalism in the Russian and the Soviet Empire and intersect with minority and nationality issues. And also in my teaching activities in Paris, I often analyze with my students the debate between Austro-Marxist thinkers and the Bolsheviks and the national minorities situation in border regions. So I'm also interested in this, since already 4 years, I think, in this NTA program and project, very interesting. So the name of the conference was The Theory and Practice of Non-Territorial Autonomy in Europe, a Historical Perspective. So I think the conference was a success, a great success, because it demonstrates how diverse, multiform, and complex the concept and the experimentations of NTA through a frame of time which begins with Austro-Hungarian Empire and ends in the interwar period, but lasts until now through an interdisciplinary perspective. Even if in the title you have historical perspective, we had also this interdisciplinary perspective, especially with David Smith's keynote and Levente Salat paper. The papers were already brilliantly discussed and debated, so no necessity to duplicate the work. Most of the papers presented case studies focused on a locality. This morning, Olomouc, for example, a locality or a diocese or a parish in Tamara share paper, a region, a national group, a theoretician or actor of the NTA, such as Jewish or Polish thinkers and political actors that were also discussed this morning. Through different sources and methodology, so we heard about diaries, personal archive and biographical sources, national registries, census and school boards, municipal councils and bishop meetings, interviews also for the more contemporary period. NTA revealed to be knitted to state, a state of nationalities. No surprise in it, the inventors of the concept were not anarchists, and they wanted to save the state or to reconfigure and modernize the state. They were also true believers that the nation is a collective identity that structured personal, cultural, and social life and needs to gain representation within the state. But NTA is very often also knitted to territoriality. Often, NTA arrangements are subservient to territorial local cultural autonomy, as in Soviet Ukraine, for example, with the circuit courts described by Elena. Or the NTA can be complementary to the state nationalist design. For example, support to the cross-border minorities, Hungarian, German in interwar context or current context, through public and private organizations and granting of rights to diaspora. NTA was conceived as a way to harmonize and maintain peaceful relationship between communities or pacify multi-ethnic societies. But in order to save them from partition, but it can serve or stimulate also the competition between nationalities through categorization, assignation, and nationalist activism, lobbying, and political national networks. So, of course, it is a polysemic reality and discourse, because it can lead to one direction and the opposite direction also. A major issue is about empire, of course, and imperial legacy. INTIA's projects are for multi-ethnic spaces, cross-border and diasporic realities. It originated in Eastern and Central Europe because there were multi-ethnic empires with no majority, as you mentioned this morning. Empire, especially Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, and even Russian empires, are since two historiographical decades perceived as a political entity where laid possibilities to implement politics of difference, if we follow the fundamental book of Jane Burbank and Fred Cooper. The angle was more about delegation of powers and territorial autonomy, federalist projects. In this respect, the conference adds the important and currently key issue of how managing minorities without territories, territories with no national majority, or national groups with imperfect adequation to territory. But to follow Jeremy Keen's remarks, sometimes where describes personal cultural national arrangements in the paper without autonomy. There was an interesting debate on formal and informal autonomy that needs to be deepened later. I mentioned the papers of Gabor Egri and Levente Salat. There are for sure already a huge historiography for the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Monographies on region or city, intellectual, political, and social history, the debate around national indifference, Tarazara, and not national indifference in the everyday life is revealing of the advancements in the state of art for the Austro-Hungarian Empire. For the Russian and Soviet societies, I think the historical findings are still ongoing. In the papers focusing on Ukrainian, Muslim, Polish, Jewish, German autonomy projects and experimentation, and we had the wonderful paper of Irina Nam in this perspective, we saw the elite, but less easily grassroots perceptions, knowledge, and uses of national autonomy arrangements. It is, of course, matter of sources, less accessible, especially at the local level. Still, sources as the letters and petitions sent to local, regional, and national authorities by minority people need to be analyzed in the future. Estonian case can be a model not only for interior autonomy, as we had in the paper during the conference, but also Estonian case can be a model for the sources available and already used, and can be a model for other research in other parts of the Russian Empire. For me, the most fascinating discovery during the conference is that NTA can be perceived as an utopian project that coincides well at the time of political revolution, segmentation of sovereignty, and state reconfiguration. It gave place and space for political imagination parallel to federalist ideas. But period of transition, it is also a period of anxiety and anguish for the maintaining of the state. As wrote one of my favorite legal scholars, Robert Retzlob, and it was mentioned in the paper of Leon Castellanos. He was Alsatian, from Alsace, and he mentioned in one of his works that there is a real fear of autonomy among the political leaders, because autonomy will tear the state apart, déchirer l'État. I think it is interesting because so I think that NTA is really interesting to study during the period of transition, but we had to think about imagination on one perspective, but on the other, anguish and anxiety. National non-territorial autonomy is often ephemeral experience. Why? What does it mean politically, all these failures? So I think that we need also to link all this project and this discourse and these practices with political agenda. The second other suggestion, and it was shown this morning, it's the importance of circulation of ideas and projects. Each minority has its thinkers and practitioners, and it is really great to see how it circulates between, in a transnational level, between each minority, all these ideas and knowledges. And in this perspective, I would suggest to broaden the scope in order to grasp the complexity of NTA beyond Europe in the NTA arrangements in colonial and post-colonial history. I would like to mention an Indian anthropologist, Arjun Appadurai, which studied diasporic social life in post-colonial context and developed a very brilliant idea about ethnoscape. Ethnoscapes, it means private and public community organizations which reproduce the local life at a global level. And I think the study of this post-colonial history and the diasporic communities at the global level now can, of course, also put a new perspective, even in order to understand in another way these NTA discourse and practices in Europe, and especially in Eastern and Central Europe. Of course, we can, I could add a lot, but I think it is time to end now. And thank you very much for all the papers. It was really inspiring. And I'm sure that there will be a lot of articles, books, and new projects in order to follow up this conference. Thank you.